Hello, everybody, and welcome to one of our first interviews for the UK Ghost Story Festival. My name's Alex Davis. I'm coordinating the event, which is taking place at the Darrell Museum of Making over the weekend of 16th to 19th of February. This will be the first in a series of our chats with our speakers and authors, and delighted to welcome first through the door today, Darrell Buxton, Derby film legend, horror aficionado. Darrell is the editor of the excellent We Belong Dead magazine, also the author and editor of many books on horror film, most recently Chopped Meat, looking at the British horror cinema of the 1970s. And Darrell, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alex. Looking forward to this, and hope that the people that are attending the Ghost Story Festival will get something out of these promotions and get a flavour of what the festival's going to be like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Darrell. So obviously I was looking at your background and your resume, you're sort of a lover of horror almost kind of in all its forms, I suppose, and a real wide spectrum. So I'm just going to ask, what is it that you think particularly appeals to you about the ghost story as a form, would you say?
Sure, yeah. I think the ghost story is different to a lot of conventional horror, because there seems to be potential for expansion, I think, within that theme, within the theme of ghosts, which you might not necessarily get that when you're talking about, a rampaging monster figure, a vampire, a mummy, or a killer robot or something, and it's in terms of the word horror as well, horror fiction in print and on screen is a chief central interest to me. But I think the thing about ghosts, the aspect of the ghost that appeals to me, is that ghosts don't necessarily have to be something scary.
Yeah.
I think many of my own sort of favourite uses of ghosts and spectral imagery are in ways where the author or the filmmaker or whoever sort of plays around with that a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, like you say, sometimes it's about the character. The character's more scared of the ghost in a way than the reader can be, or the viewer might be. Yeah, absolutely,
definitely. You get that in M.R. James. I think M.R. James stories, which are sort of the classics of the form, and what everybody is still copying to this day, and they're very much focused on the person, be it the victim or the person stepping into unwarily into somewhere where they shouldn't have to tread. One area that I've become very interested in, and this sort of stemmed a little bit from doing my post-punk Phantoms talk last year, or in 2021 indeed, at the UK Ghost Festival, and I did a little piece in there on the Altered Images song "Dead Pop Stars," and the whole idea of what I was talking about there was that I see that song as being about death, but it's not about conventional death. It's about the death of an idea. It's about the death of a concept. What's died in that song is a growing teenager's love and adoration of the pop idols whose posters they've got on their bedroom wall. And the song is sung from the point of view of that adoration, of the love, So it's this abstract idea. In that song, it's an abstract idea that dies, and my theory that stemmed from that, and I think I love seeing people use this in fiction, and a lot of people are starting to use it when they think about what is a ghost. I love the idea that something can die that's not even been alive, that's not a conventional living, breathing being. An idea, a concept is a living thing, and when that dies, like everything that dies, it's got the potential to have a spirit.
Yes,
and I love that sort of idea, and that's sort of what I'm looking for in my ghost fiction at the moment.
Fantastic stuff. I'll try back slightly because you mentioned M.R. James in there, and I think, as you say, as a ghost story lover, fan, I think there's a name you sort of can't go without mentioning. And obviously someone who not started per se, but was a part of a very kind of British tradition of ghost stories. Why do you think the ghost story tradition is so British? 'Cause I know you watch and read horror from all over the world. I'm just really curious, and particularly with the British slant, in fact. So just that.
I've got a few ideas on that, and I think they're rather sort of base, really. I'd say our dreadful climate and our dreadful weather has a lot to do with it, largely because I think that probably fosters and prompts suggestions of things lurking in rainy, desolate places, or wanting to come inside out of the cold, which is the classic sort of a great thing in Russian literature,
Yes.
and I suppose our heritage and architecture as well, and the fact that we've got a lot of surviving ruins around the
Yes,
country,
true.
all over the place, and again, they seem like super places for a haunting or two. And every time you visit one, you do a tour or something around some ruined castle, and the first thing the guy tells you about is the ghosts.
It's the ghosts, yeah.
Yeah, it's always about, this castle's haunted, or this stately home's haunted. And I think maybe it's starting to change a little bit in recent times, but I think Britain traditionally has always been a very sort of religious place as well. And so you have those religious teachings hammered at you from a very young age. And of course, a lot of that is what kids pick up on when they sort of learn about Bible studies and things, is all the supernatural stuff.
Yes, true. Yes.
I think there's something in a child's imagination that sort of focuses on, what's the weird bit of this story? When you're being taught about religion, it's like, there's all kinds of stuff going on here that appeals to me in the same way that a ghost story appeals. So I think it's those three things really. There's a sort of peculiar British aspect to all this as well, because things like religion, of course, happen all over the world. And another thing that's more modern, I think, that taps into the ghost story is the ghost in the machine idea. I suppose everybody, when I switched on my laptop today to do this talk, I was, I hope my connection's good and all this, and if it goes wrong, what kind of entity am I going to blame for the failure? And then, of course, we've had the rise in the 21st century of reality TV. And one of the first things that came on reality TV was things like Most Haunted and all of these ghost hunting shows. Now, again, the two things I've mentioned there and the whole sort of ghost in the machine idea are a sort of global phenomenon. They're not peculiarly British. Where I think the British character comes into those is if you take something like a ghost hunting reality TV show, we've got the ability to sort of make that really crass in a peculiar sort of British way, like getting the Happy Mondays on as the guest stars or something, and having them go to a haunted house, and it really does seem part of the British character that we've got this magic in the air, this idea that something has come back from beyond, and it's presented by sort of Gloria Hunniford's daughter or someone, or it's all treated like a game show, and as I say, you get the most these sort of third division sort of semi-celebrities coming on to sort of wander about in front of the cameras with their sort of head cams on, I think Britain's got its own sort of take on the ghost, and I think the British take on the ghost does change with time as well. I think some of it stays the same and some of it sort of develops as time passes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feels like a nice segue to something I was going to ask about your talk at the festival, because your topic is afterlife during wartime. So you're sort of looking back a bit to the World War period and kind of like the World War period themselves and the in-between period. I was really interested like where the idea came from, sort of maybe like a little few of things you might be touching on.
Here's the weird thing, the title came first actually, because I'd actually been, when you invited me onto this year's festival, the first thing I thought about was I immediately linked back to the last time I appeared, and I did the post-punk Phantoms talk, and that set off this train of thought in my head that was nothing to do with the festival. It was just me thinking about post-punk, as I often do, and I got thinking about the Talking Heads, and I got thinking about what's my favourite Talking Heads album, and I concluded it's Fear of Music from 1979, and that opens with a track called Life During Wartime. And then as part of this mad train of thought, I thought, Afterlife During Wartime.
Good.
What a great name for a topic. So the name came first, and then the whole thing then fell into place, because with my love of horror movies, when you read books on horror, or you see people sort of talk about or lecture on horror, or you see sort of Blu-ray commentaries and things, the automatic focus seems to be for experts in the field to talk about either the 1930s with your Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi and so on, or the 1970s with The Exorcist and Jaws and The Wicker Man and all those great independent films that came out. Or a third decade that gets sort of referenced now is the early 2000s, where you've got Japan, Korea, Spain and France all piling in and saying, look, we're back, you know, we're taking over the horror movie. We're doing J horror, K horror, we're doing the French New Extremity, we're doing the Spanish ghost story and the weird sort of supernatural Spanish movies, that whole wave of films that came out of there. And okay, yeah, I accept the 30s, the 70s and the 2000s are probably the three big decades for horror. My personal favorite has always been the 1940s. I've always had a fascination for the 40s, partly because it follows directly on from the 30s, and so you're getting all these weird little spin-offs of the classics. You know, instead of Dracula and Frankenstein, you're getting these mashups that Universal were doing, the monster rallies and so on. And the interesting thing, when the title Afterlife During Wartime popped into my head, was the sheer number of ghostly and supernatural films that occurred during the 40s. And they're in varying degrees as well. And it fascinated me. When I devised the title and I started thinking more and more about this, I thought, well, you're at a time where the world is facing this global conflict, and then by the mid-40s, when that's all over, it ends with the atrocities of dropping the bombs on Japan. Then after the war, it's discovered that the Nazi concentration camps are discovered, and horror in a literary or filmic form just could not compete with that. How do you compete with the atom bomb? How do you compete with Belsen and so on? You know, you can't. So the supernatural fiction sort of had to take another turn in the 40s, I think. And in film, we've got a lot of interesting strands there. You've still got your conventional ghost movies, your sort of scare movies, but you've also got certainly American cinema started trying to turn that into comedy as well, which was an interesting sort of sideline. And then you've got a whole wave of angel movies. We had two on at the Quad at Christmas. We had It's a Wonderful Life and The Bishop's Wife. And there's a whole string of these things, and they sort of connect with the ghost story, because how different is The Bishop's Wife or It's a Wonderful Life from, say, something like Curse of the Cat People with its ghostly figure? It's roughly the same plot, and yet one film's considered to be a piece of supernatural semi-horror fiction, and the others are like, oh, they're these family Christmas classics. But they've essentially got the same plot. So I'm going to be tying angel films into all of this as well. And it's interesting that angels should surface as a major movie topic at this time, at a time when death became domestic, you know, when every household had somebody or knew somebody who had been brutally killed or blown to pieces in the conflict. And I just find that it's a whole sort of melting pot there. And I'm also going to be looking at what happened before the war, immediately before the war, and immediately after the war, because there's some very interesting films that seem to either predict the conflict or sort of tie in with the early stages of the war, and the responses after the war in terms of ghost movies are quite interesting as well. And I'm not going to give too much away about the films I'm going to cover, because there are some very, very interesting ones. I've got this brilliant British public information film that's a very much a post-war film. But I'm going to be showing this British public information film, which is also a ghost movie. So
Right.
it's about a minute and a half long, and it's a ghost movie. So
Fantastic.
and a very weird film noir as well, which is a sort of ghost movie. And one other strand that you were getting at the time as well, because people were starting to make propaganda films at that time. So obviously you'd have a lot of films about Japanese spies or Nazi spies or you know, sort of collaborators and so on. And quite often the plots of these would involve them trying to get into Britain or get a foothold into parts of Europe or America where they shouldn't be, by pretending to be ghosts. You know, there'd be a sort of Scooby-Doo plot. And when the mask is pulled off at the end, it's a Nazi under it, you know. And so there's a lot of that stuff going on as well. And it's interesting how even the fake ghost was used as a figure in wartime. So yeah, that's a lot of the stuff that I'll be covering, and I'm hoping I can pack it all into the 1 hour that's been out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah, brilliant stuff. So just one final question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to be asking quite a lot of people this, because I think it's nice to have a bit of a recommended reading or recommended viewing. Again, calling upon your vast repertoire. Any kind of particular ghost stories on TV, on screen, that you particularly would recommend, or even, of course, as a book as well?
Well, as we've already said, I think the Lawrence Gordon Clark and Rosemary Hill M.R. James adaptations in the 70s, and the Charles Dickens The Signalman, the famous Christmas ghost stories for the BBC. I've recently written a little piece on those for the chopped meat book that you mentioned. And I describe them in there. I've just done this short couple of paragraphs on them, because the book focuses on cinema films rather than TV. But we've done this big TV section in the back. And in the section on the ghost stories for Christmas, my 3-word description of the whole 8-part series is just about faultless. And you know, but people know that already, you know.
That's no revelation.
You know, I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. What I will recommend, I'll go back to the 1940s actually, and pick a book and a movie. And the book I'm going to pick is a movie tie-in. It's an early example of the film tie-in, and a sign of a pointer to the sort of range of material that I'm going to be covering on my talk. Is one of the films I'll cover, and again it fits into the sort of angel part of the topic, is going to be the British film A Matter of Life and Death, with David Niven, Michael Powell, Emmerich Pressburger, and that was I believe that was the first ever film selected as a royal command performance for a movie to show to royalty. This was done in 1946, and they produced a very early example of the film tie-in. You know, they converted the script into prose and did this lovely edition with a wraparound cover and lovely tinted stills and black and white stills inside to reflect the film. You know, it's a mixture of colour and black and white. And it's quite a rare book, I believe, now, although you do see copies pop up here and there online, and occasionally you'll find it in a second-hand bookshop. I think I've seen 3 copies in the wild, of which I bought one of them when I was a teenager, and it's been like a prized possession ever since. So yeah, if you can track down the book of A Matter of Life and Death, I do recommend that. Even if you never read it, it's lovely to have sitting on your shelf. But I have read it, and it's great, and it does what a good tie-in should do. It makes you sort of revisit the film in your mind, you know. And I'm also going to pick a film from the 40s as well, and another one that I hope to have a bit of time to talk about during the presentation at the festival event. It was the movie debut of Lawrence Harvey, who went on to a long career through the 50s and 60s. British film from 1948 called House of Darkness. And the title's a little bit disappointing and generic. You know, House of Darkness could be any old plot, could have that title. But I remember once watching this film on a tiny little DVD player on a train journey between Derby and London. So 90 minutes. The film, luckily, I think in its longest version, it's only about 75 minutes. And the commonly seen one is just over an hour. So it was perfect to watch on the train journey, and I'm watching it on this tiny little screen about 6 inches across, and with people around me all sort of, you know, chomping on sandwiches, trying to keep their kids under control and stuff, you know. And even in those conditions, the film just riveted me and absolutely terrified me. And it's a great mixture of early psychological horror, because you've got this whole plot going on about feuding brothers trying to sort of wrest a property from one another, and one of the brothers trying to drive the other one to suicide. So you've got this very early example of psychological horror. Yeah. And then another character then moves into the house later on, and they're haunted by the spirit of the dead man. So and there's all this, and he was a violinist, so there's all this stuff about eerie violin music and things like that going on. And it's just a riveting little movie, great little British B movie of the 40s. Yeah, lovely sort of combination of what was going to become the modern trend in horror of the psychology of feuding people, mixed in with traditional sort of spooky ghost horror. And it's just a terrific film. So yeah, House of Darkness, highly recommended.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Darrell. Very much appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks so much for chatting with us. Really look forward to seeing you at the festival and finding out more about your talk. Your horror walk around Derby's already sold out, so that's really good fun as well. Thanks so much, Darrell, for your time, and look forward to seeing you in February. Thank you.
Thanks very much.